All right, so as far as the Decadal survey goes, one of the big motivations for this workshop was that NASA would like to see a large community involvement related to fundamental physics and dust and plasma specifically as contributions to the BPS Decadal survey. So the Decadal survey is a way for the community to tell NASA what they think what we think is important for NASA to spend its money on, right? And sort of give priorities for the community for the next decade, or for NASA to spend money on in the next decade. And these decadal survey white papers, they can be pretty short. So they can be 2 to 5 pages. You can write one individually, or you can write one with a group of authors, or you can just be a signatory on a paper that somebody else writes. There is some advantage to having multiple authors on a given paper. It sort of shows a community consensus around, yeah, this is an important idea. This is something that NASA should prioritize going forward. So part of the motivation for having these workshops is to get the community together, get people talking about what important questions exist and we think are answerable in the next decade. Part of this, to sort of achieve this goal, we had a dust and plasma workshop back in May, which had some similar themes as what we're seeing here in this LSSW workshop. And as part of that, we brainstormed a list of white paper topics. I am going to put that, it's a Google Sheet. I'm going to put that link in the chat for everyone to see, and then I'm going to also project it on to the screen. Okay. All right. So this is sort of the brainstormed list of white paper topics that we came up with in May. So we have, a working paper title, kind of some of the main ideas associated with the paper, a main author if one has already been identified, and then co-author names. So this and signatory names. So you are welcome to add your name to a co-author list or a signatory list. Also, we want to discuss at this workshop right now, we want to discuss these papers that we've brainstormed and see if we're missing anything. Is there anything that we already have on the list that we can get some volunteers for folks to write up, and maybe a group of people to work on together? So I thought the first thing that I would do would just go through the list of white papers that we already have brainstormed, and then just solicit input from the group on any topics that we might be missing. Okay, so the first topic is dust mitigation and exploration enabled by dust plasma interactions. So this is a paper that I'm leading that is, looking at these interactions between the dust, the plasma, and the spacecraft, and sort of emphasizing the importance of studying this full system. Next paper is looking at an in situ mission to discover the ground truth of dust motion. So electrostatic lofting, electrostatic levitation, does it actually happen or not? Can we have some observations that are specifically targeted to those science questions? Another white paper is looking at plasma properties at different latitudes, longitudes, local times, altitudes. So this is looking at kind of Paul Balan's topic of, we really need to know the plasma environment at these different altitudes and times of day in order to be able to predict how dust might move around the surface of a body. The second one, which I think kind of has a copy-paste title, but this is really saying, can we use the lunar surface as a very large vacuum chamber, right? Are there experiments that we could do on the lunar surface that we can't do on Earth just by virtue of the fact that we have a really low density plasma and we have unique plasma properties in in this environment. We also were looking at a paper focusing on the need for high accuracy dust charge measurements. So as we saw in some of the talks today, there's the ability to measure dust charge at, 1,000 electron resolution, but we'd really like to have resolutions around 10 to 100 electron, and that's pretty hard to do. So this is encouraging NASA to spend money to develop these sorts of technologies. All right, hold on. Okay, now at the workshop that we had in May, we had a sort of more traditional planetary science dust and plasma track, and then we also had a dusty complex plasma track that was looking more at like the ISS compact sort of multi-user facilities. So the white papers that are from this point down in this spreadsheet are brainstormed from that group. And so this is suggesting that NASA pursues a comprehensive program of dusty and complex plasma experiments in microgravity conditions. So this is not necessarily on the lunar surface, could also be on the ISS or on Gateway, any sort of long-term microgravity exposure. We also have a suggestion to continue or increase ground-based research looking at, dusty plasmas. The Decadal survey process can solicit inputs also from outside the US. So if you are an international collaborator, you are welcome to write a white paper or be a signatory on a white paper. And one of the comments from the other group at the May workshop was that we should continue our interagency cooperation and really strengthen these collaborations for international dusty plasma facilities. Yep, so this is again just a general topic related to studying dusty plasmas in microgravity, specifically related to the compact facility on the ISS. There's also an interest in the plasma groups looking at active particles, studying multiple particle systems at the atomic level near critical point. And then there's a topic looking at dusty plasma research with astrophysical relevance. So this is kind of stressing the significance of dusty plasmas in the more general science motivation sense. So astrophysics, heliophysics, planetary science, these sorts of topics. We just have suggested authors here. So there are definitely some white papers that people think is a good idea, but they're not ready to commit to actually writing this white paper. So if you're interested in any of these topics, we're definitely welcome to have other people lead these white papers or contribute to white papers, maybe work on a joint co-authorship with someone else. Statistical physics and thermodynamics, fluctuations and instabilities, again, looking more at the dusty plasmas topics. And then again, looking at these fundamentals of dust charging in dusty plasmas or on surfaces in plasmas. So that was the list of topics that we brainstormed at the May workshop. But is there anything that folks think that we are missing? I'm going to try to bring up the chat window if I can so that I can see it at the same time. Here we go. There we go, chat. Okay, so are we missing anything? Are there other white papers? A topic related to dust mitigation. So we have the first white paper is looking at dust mitigation specifically in the context of dust plasma investigations. Basically, The idea behind this paper is saying we need to know more about dust plasma interactions in order to enable exploration and in order to enable mitigation. So if you're interested in this topic, then please add yourself to the list. We are looking for co-authors. Other comments from anyone? These white papers are not due until the end of October. There is some advantage for getting white papers in sooner versus later because there's probably going to be a whole onslaught of white papers at the end of October. And if we get these white papers to the committee early, they may be more fresh when they read the white papers. So there is some benefit to getting your white paper in early. And remember, these are only 2 to 5 pages long. So it's really, in the grand scheme of things, although I know we're all busy, it is not that big of a time commitment. Okay, if you have suggestions for white paper topics that are classified or proprietary, I will note that all of the white papers are going to be public, so I would not recommend submitting something that is proprietary or classified. I also am not sure that the members of the Decadal panel are required to have a clearance, so I guess if anything, I would suggest reaching out to the head of the panel if you would like to ask about how you might convey a classified idea to the panel. But really, the Decadal survey is supposed to be an open process where the community communicates to NASA about what they think is important, and then the community communicates to the NRC, the National Research Council, about what they think is important, and the NRC panel then makes a list of sort of prioritized science objectives for the next decade. And this is all public, so there really isn't a method to talk about classified work. Any other comments or suggestions for white papers that people would like to discuss now, or even technical topics?
Well, I may have a question for a technical topic. This is Karl-Heinz from Germany. With the lunar dust compared with the plasma, what influence this might have to a lunar-based space telescope, because it also would be covered after a certain amount of time with a dust layer, and this would decrease the quality of picture. Thank you.
Yes, so I think that dust obscuring optics is something to be concerned about, especially if we're going to have a long-term observatory on the lunar surface. We would like to be able to predict the rate at which that obscuration would happen, both in the undisturbed environment, as well as if we're having launches and landings on the lunar surface, how quickly is this problem accelerated due to those launches and landings. And any plasma motivated dust motion is definitely relevant to that question as well. So I think that is an important and unanswered question. I don't know if any of the other speakers would like to address it. Okay, it's a lot easier to get group participation and discussion going in person, but hopefully we will be out of these virtual conferences soon. I don't know if any of the other conference organizers like Insub or Ulf or Brad, if you have any comments about what we need to do to wrap up the day today.
Yeah, this is sort of, I think we can just close the session when you feel like you've given people enough time to contribute, and it looks to be quiet, and I think the attendance list is dwindling. So I think you probably just close the session and we just move on from here.
Okay.
Excuse me?
Yep.
Hi, Christine. Yeah, I was just talking with JR. We are interested in the that paper for the high accuracy dust charge measurements, for sure.
Okay. Let's see, here we go. Is that Tom Keaton? Was that who was speaking?
Yes.
I'm just adding your name to the list, and feel free to, feel free to edit this document as well if you have other co-authors that you'd like to add. And you can also reach out to the main author because they may have already sent an email to the list of co-authors that they have. So I would recommend, reaching out to the main author saying, hey, just found out about this. I'm interested in being involved. How can I help? In case they've already gotten started.
All right, will do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
Christine?
Yes.
Christine, this seems to be focused on dust mitigation problems. What about the other topics, lunar topics of research? Do they have their own white paper organization?
So if you're talking about the other tracks in the conference, then yes, those other tracks are going to have their own white paper organization. This Google Sheet is just looking at dust plasma interactions and white papers associated with that.
How do we access those papers, those organizations?
I would email the session chairs of those other tracks to see how they're organizing their white papers. They may or may not have a public Google Sheet that they're using for organization. This is what I find easiest and has also been used in the planetary science community to sort of get community input in different white papers.
Yeah, it's a good way for teaming. That's great. Okay, I'll look it up. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. There was one more question in the chat, potential impacts of dust on lunar orbit activities. If this is another topic for white paper, feel free to add it to the list here. We did talk about, at the prior workshop, we did talk about interest in having sort of a witness plate that would be on the outside of your lander and come down to the surface with the spacecraft and then back up to the gateway. And using that to understand the dust that the spacecraft is exposed to during a sort of round trip to the lunar surface. And that might be an idea that goes along with this topic of dust and its impact on spacecraft in lunar orbit. Okay. Well, seeing no further comments in the chat, I would like to thank all our presenters, thank everyone for attending today. And just encourage everyone to write a white paper or try to get involved with a white paper and communicate to NASA the significance of this sort of science, both from a fundamental physics perspective as well as a science and technology development perspective. So thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you at a real meeting in person in the future.